There's no questions. We didn't punt.
Another hit to the emergency long snapper room. I'm just curious what the plan is there.
We were wondering if that was going to come up here. So, no, probably Zylstra. Okay. Yep. Good question, though. First thing I thought of, too.
The shifting dynamics of guys you've needed to use on special teams. You have, I guess, elevated Houston into a bigger role here the last month, and then brought in Turner, who's got a resume but also needs acclimation. What have those two guys been able to give you here in the last few weeks?
Yeah, no, it's been good. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is to play the best 11 guys out there at any time, and so then just kind of who is that, and that kind of moves and shifts throughout the year, and based off who you have available, what guys' roles are. Obviously losing Alex will shift some of that again. But in some of those shifts, like Houston's come in and he's playing like two teams for us, kickoff return. Sometimes he plays punt return. Last week he did a little bit of that for us, but so he's stepped in and done a nice job. But ultimately, that's kind of how this league goes. I mean, we're just looking at the board of, players that are injured or been injured throughout the year. And there's a lot of them, but that's really what this league's turned into. You got to be able to adjust and adapt, and the next guy's got to be able to come up and play. You got to develop guys on the back end of the roster while they're on your practice squad so that they're ready to go when their name gets called. So it'll be more of the same for us this week.
Your units have played really clean as far as penalties. There are some units that have like 4 times as many penalties. Is it a focus? Is it?
Yeah.
How are you so effective?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a stat that I do take a lot of pride in. I would say traditionally we've been pretty good. I think here we've been pretty good. In my career we've been pretty good. But there's been a couple of years that are not as good as I want them to be. But those are always the ones that stand out. Yeah, to answer your question, we do spend a lot of time on it. We watch every penalty. Well, I watch every penalty or every play from around the league, and then I'll pull out the penalties that I think apply to us on any given week based off the return scheme we're running or the coverage scheme we're running, and positions that some of our players may find themselves in, and then we'll review those at the end of the week and just put ourselves in their shoes and try to learn from their mistake. So we spend a lot of time talking about it and coaching it and teaching it. I believe that penalties can be devastating to you, especially in the return game. And people probably don't talk about that enough, which is another thing, not to go back into statistics, but people don't tack on the penalties like on punts or punt returns, and they just talk about the net, and the net doesn't include a penalty. Or like last week, they had a false start, and that backed them up 5 yards before the play, so we got 5 yards of field position there on Jacksonville's punt team. And so there's some hidden yardage in there that never gets talked about on a lot of these plays. And in the return game, it can be devastating, especially when you're playing against a punter who hammers the ball down the field. If the guy hammers the ball down the field 55 yards and you have a holding call on a gunner outside wide, it's a 10-yard penalty, but it's not only a 10-yard penalty, it also negates any return. So it's an automatic 65-yard net. It shows up in the stat sheet as 55, but it really should be 65. So when you add those penalties into the equation, they can be huge. And if there's a 10-yard return, that penalty now is not 10 yards, it's 20-yard penalty. Obviously, if a team went out there and got 20-yard penalties every play, there'd be people irate, but they don't see them that way in this phase. So it's a great question and something we spend a lot of time on. And our players they're great about it. They're conscientious. They're trying to win. And that's really what it goes back to me is like there's some teams that play very aggressive on special teams, and they go out there and they hold a lot. And because of it, they get some big plays. And people see the big plays, but they don't see the other stuff that comes with those plays. And to me, the goal is to win the game. And you do that as a team by playing together collectively and monitoring those hitting yards and all that stuff.
Khalil Dorsey the best gunner in the game. I'm just curious, what are the characteristics of a great gunner?
Yeah, I would say he is a great gunner, and we're fortunate to have him. I think the biggest thing at that position, if you had to have one thing, you got to have speed. Because ultimately you're going to get singled up a decent amount. I mean, if it's 4th and 3 or 2 or 1, it's a close game or you have whatever, a lead, you're definitely keeping 8 guys in the box probably. You're defending against the fake, so it's putting a guy a one-on-one situation outside wide. And if you got a punter who can hammer the ball down the field like we have with Fox, if that guy can just flat run, then he can run around a guy. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go through him, so you don't have to be strong. But if you have speed and strength and size, obviously that's better. But number one is speed. And then on top of that, if you have the speed, then you need a competitive mindset or skill set. I mean, those guys are usually ultra competitive guys. They live in the fast lane type guys. You know, they're going for it. They're always on. They're competing. They hate losing. They want to make the tackle. They want to get to the ball. Speaking of that, these guys have a great one. Arguably the best wideout on special teams in the league in number 16. These guys have a really good group. So he's a great gunner out there wide. He runs a 4.44. Their other gunner on the other side, 31, Goodson or Godson, however you say his name, is a running back, runs 4.44. These guys have linebackers. I think all of them run 4.50 or better. Speed and special teams can be big because a lot of these plays are just long area plays. You know, you're covering 40 yards, and if they can run around you. So if you can't run with them, then you're in trouble. So these guys are a really good group. They're number 41's a hair-on-fire player, man. This guy is relentless. He's got a great story. I read it this summer. There's a great article about him. But just a great player. And I got a lot of respect for. Like I said, their corners are fast, their safeties are fast. These guys are good, so we got our hands full.
One of the hallmarks, I guess, of you and Campbell's special teams philosophies is putting stress on the opponents. I think last year you had touchback rate closer to 2/3. This year it's closer to 80%. This new return was meant to bring more returns to the game. At what point do we maybe consider that this isn't working the way it was intended and needs to be revamped again?
Yeah, I think we're on the right track. Bottom line is some of it comes down to a risk reward right now, and if the reward's a couple yards or 2 yards or 3 yards, you got a good football team. But the risk is taking a shot and some kind of explosive play against you. Then it's like, is it worth it for us in this situation right now? You got a big lead. Is it worth giving them another chance to try to make a play? So there's a lot of things that go into it. Obviously, we're going to go outdoors a couple weeks from now. We're going to be in Chicago. We go to San Francisco in the playoffs. We could be outdoors. So you got to obviously be ready to cover these things. And we spent a lot of time on it and made a lot of adjustments during the year. We had 2 in the last game there. So we'll just kind of keep, balancing that risk and reward out and trying to make good decisions. But I think overall, I do think that there's a lot of positives about the play. It's been safe. I think it's been a lot safer. I don't have the data, but from what I understand, it's been a lot safer. They are getting some more returns. I think that they'll make some modifications based off, they're getting a lot of information and data so that they can make really some good decisions at the end of this year, which they really couldn't do last year. I mean, they didn't know how it was going to look. So there's kind of at least a baseline. They've set that on the play and given them a chance to move forward with it. I think there's a lot of positives. It's not perfect, but I think it's a really good start.
You're obviously very focused right now on the season and you can't worry about rule change, but what does that process look for you? Is that after the season, and do you make your opinions known to the competition committee or whoever's making these decisions?
Yeah, and I think, honestly, I don't have all the answers yet either. We're still gathering information and data. I think there's still stuff out there. I think as the weather changes and the ball doesn't travel as far down on kickoffs and you see shorter kicks, what does that do to it? As the field gets a little bit like our game in Green Bay, the field's not quite as much traction, you're not able to play as loose and as fast and on the edge of your cleats, and so that slows guys down, and the return game looks a little different in those situations. So I think there's a lot of variables still out there that we'll see, but at the end of the year, if they ask me, I'll definitely share my opinions and thoughts on the play.
Is there, I imagine you had those conversations now, but I wanted to ask about Zeke Turner. I think he was your personal protector 2 weeks ago. Who knows, last week since you didn't punt. But what went into that decision? What do you like about him, and
Yeah, number one, I would say, obviously, it's a great job by Brad and Holmes and those guys in the personnel department of finding him and getting him. He's a player that I've respected for a long time. When I was in Philly, he was in Arizona. We played against each other a handful of games. I always thought he was a very good player. But even better than that for us was actually just the fit. I mean, he really has a very similar game to Jalen Reeves-Maven, and they both played personal protector. They actually both played in the same punt system. Us in Arizona kind of use the same terminology system, very similar in that regard. They are also very aggressive with the fakes and all that stuff, so he has experience doing all that for them. And just the way he covers, the way he plays the game is very similar to Jalen Reeves-Maven. So it was like just a natural slide in and fit. So it was an easy decision for us. He's super smart and intelligent. I got a lot of confidence and faith and trust in him already in a very short period of time. The special teams coach from Arizona sent me a text message and just said, I don't know if I trust another guy more than I trust him. So, and that's a guy I respect quite a bit. So anyway, yeah, we feel good about him. Him or Jerome, we'll find out.
I ask you, well aware that you take these things seriously, but have you ever been around a better holder than Jack Fox? And what about that is he so good at in particular?
Yeah, so, I mean, my favorite part about the story for him and holding is it's great to hear you say that, and I do think the guy's incredible, but when I first got here, he was not, and I wasn't shy about saying that either, and he's done just an outstanding job of working at it. I will also say one more time that the snapper is key in the whole thing, and when the guy rips the ball back there like our guy does, and it's a tight spiral, very, very catchable ball with a lot of velocity and gets in your hand quick and just sticks. I think it's like a good quarterback. Some of these guys, the way they throw the ball, man, it just tends to stick in these guys' hands. So the way he throws the ball there, Hogan, back there to Fox really helps, obviously. So it gets back there quick. But then he's sure-handed. He gets the ball down on the ground quick. He does the same thing every time. His hands aren't erratic. They're nice and fluid and smooth. He gets the laces right when they're not right. And then there's a lot going into the tilt and the lean of the ball, too. So tilted forward or backwards and then leaning, towards him or away from him. And so he really does a great job of getting all that stuff right and down and set, and that really helps the kicker tremendously.
There's a lot of work that is going on with Jake. Maybe we haven't seen some of it yet, but on the different type of kickoffs that you may ask for, line drives into the landing zone, dropping it 1 yard deep, dropping it 9 yards deep, just the different things that may ultimately come up down the line.
Yeah, so it's a great question because really, so our kind of philosophy going into this season was, there's this kickoff play and you would love to be able to do a lot of different kicks. However, we got this young kicker who's new to this whole thing and he's trying to develop and improve. And it's for us, like, where do we want to put his focus and emphasis? I know this, in order to stay in this league, if you're a kicker, you better kick your field goals well. He has a huge leg, so I would say early in the year, our focus was, okay, let's just focus on kicking our field goals and making kicks and improving in that part of the game and not try to do everything all at once. Let's get to first base first, then we'll worry about getting to second. So our approach with him has really been, let's focus on the field goals and the kicking, and we'll just use your talent. And you got a big leg, we'll just use your talent and let you do that, and we won't worry about trying to be the best that we can be at everything right now. And then as we've gone through the year, it's like, okay, in the background now, let's work on some of these kicks. Let's work to the right, let's work to the left. Let's see if we can hit one on the ground. And so that stuff's all kind of going on behind the scenes, really, and developing him slowly throughout the year and adding more on his plate as he's improved and the first part of his job's become easier for him.
Is that line drive kick into the landing zone, making sure you don't hit before the 20, but you hit between the 20 and the goal line, is that a tough kick?
Yeah, so, I think if you looked at the data, and not that I'm a data guy, we went over that last week. But if you do look at some of the data, or you look at the right way, no, I'm just kidding. If you look at the information that's out there, I think that when the ball's on the ground, it ends up being the best result for the cover team. So if you can get it on the ground, the problem is getting it on the ground consistently is much harder than it looks, and not hitting it short of the landing zone is much harder than it looks for these guys. And doing it under pressure over and over in the elements, weather, and everything else that could be out there is not easy. But I think over time, you're going to see all these guys start to